Okay, so I will be talking about Burkina Faso and its former leader, Thomas Sankara. So, Burkina Faso was formerly known as Upper Volta, which was a French dominated colony at one point. However, Thomas Sankara will change it to Burkina Faso, which means the land of upright people. Not only does he change the name of the nation, but he also is going to implement a lot of reforms which are nowadays considered quite radical. But I think that these are important reforms and important policies that we should keep in mind, especially now with what's happening in the world. Thomas Sankara's introduction to Marxism is with the Madagascar uprising. Now, to clarify, Thomas Sankara, I do not believe, is a communist. However, he is a firm believer in the power of the people and Pan-Africanism. So in 1976, Sankara becomes a commander in the army, and he becomes besties with the guy who will lead a coup against him, which is Blaise Compaoré. Sorry for mispronouncing these names. Thomas Sankara is initially known, or comes to be known, because he is a really good public speaker. And this catches the attention of the current leader of what is now Upper Volta at this time, Saia Zerbo's government. And so he becomes Minister of Information, high key against his will. However, while using the authority he has, Thomas Sankara advocates for free journalism, and he actually encourages at this time the publication of government scandals. The thing is, Thomas Sankara never really appears in public to take credit for his efforts, and he kind of works behind the scenes secretly. Thomas Sankara's ideology, including the fact that he was advocating for the publication of these government scandals, got him arrested by Saia Zerbo. And on the day he resigns, he makes a public appearance and he takes the time to actually expose the corruption within the government. I mentioned Thomas Sankara's friend, Blaise Compaoré, that he became friends with in the military. And essentially, when Thomas Sankara gets fired, both of them take the opportunity to plan a coup, because it was bound to happen either way, and either way they would be blamed for it, because it just coincidentally matches. In 1983, there's a new leader in place, and he's the person who is going to overthrow Saia Zerbo's government, while Sankara and Compaoré back him, right? So this leader is Jean-Baptiste Ouedraogo, and essentially at this time, Sankara becomes promoted to prime minister. Around this time, Sankara is getting more international recognition, and because of the fact that he has a more relevant place in the government, he starts hanging out with guys like Fidel Castro and Samora Machel from Mozambique. And this essentially exposes him to more leftist and anti-imperialist ideas. So we see that his interest in socialism is growing. Most significantly, at the Non-Aligned Summit in New Delhi, Thomas Sankara makes an anti-imperialist speech. And basically this scares foreign allies, and that gives them the excuse to plot a coup against the government of Upper Volta. However, very much conveniently, this never happens, because the day that they were supposed to infiltrate, Thomas Sankara is late from coming back from a trip. And so they're like, you know what? Our goal was to get rid of Thomas Sankara, and he's not here, so there's no point. After this, Ouedraogo and Sankara start beefing, because they have, these differing ideologies. Ouedraogo thinks that Sankara is being too extremist. Sankara thinks Ouedraogo is not doing enough. And in addition to this, Sankara is getting more and more popular, not only domestically but also internationally, and this is threatening Ouedraogo's position. And at their last public meeting, the crowd, this is so interesting to me, the crowd is hyping up Sankara as he finishes up his speech. And when the head of state takes over the microphone, when Ouedraogo takes over the microphone, it gets quiet. Like, people just kind of stop, like, applauding. And I feel like that's this guy's turning point. Like, he got so offended because 3 days later, the French president's counselor of African American affairs, he pulls up. There's no journalists allowed at the airport. There's no like statement as to what his business is. And he spends the night at the French ambassador's house. Not like a hotel thing or anything. Not a hotel, not like his own residence on the property. He stays at his house. And the following morning, Thomas Sankara is arrested. Yeah. His accomplice, Compaoré, is not, because he conveniently also went on a trip at this time, kind of similar to what happened when Sankara was late earlier from the coup. But I don't know, I just find that kind of like funny and interesting. So Sankara is arrested, right? And Blaise Compaoré takes it upon himself. He's like, you know what? And he leads a coup to free Thomas Sankara. And after this, that is when Thomas Sankara officially comes to power as leader of Upper Volta, what he would change into what we now know as Burkina Faso. So some more information on Sankara's ideology is that primarily he believed in liberation from social injustice and exploitation from international imperialism. Thomas Sankara was very anti-bourgeoisie. He believed in improving working conditions, bettering pay, improving infrastructure and access to health. And he addresses some more foreign policy in his political orientation speech, where he kind of clarifies like, hey, this is exactly what we're gonna do now, right? He basically categorizes two different sort of parts of society: the bourgeoisie and the revolutionary forces. So the bourgeois enemies are considered unredeemable. These people are too far gone, and it's better to just suppress them rather than do anything to try to convert them or whatever. So a group of these includes the state bourgeoisie, or politicians and bureaucrats that are complicit in the injustice going on in Burkina Faso, the commercial bourgeoisie, large corporations, and then the middle-level bourgeoisie, who are greedy opportunists, quote, greedy opportunists who may try to identify with the people for convenience. In other words, they are liars and we cannot trust them, okay? On the other hand, there are the revolutionary forces. Some groups include the working class, the petite bourgeoisie, small shopkeepers, civil servants, who are, you know, typically in the upper class. They're doing comfortable, however, they can be persuaded. Obviously, the peasantry and the lumpen proletariat, which are people who are out of work and thus can be bought out and converted if you provide them with benefits such as employment and other things. Thomas Sankara also believes in transforming the national army, women's politics, and building the economy. Not just this, but very importantly for me, he was a very strong advocate for humanitarianism and feminism. He's not explicitly a feminist, but he highly adopts the ideology within his own political movement. In addition to that, agricultural self-sufficiency. As for foreign policy, he believes in diplomatic relations with all nations, regardless of political ideology. So Thomas Sankara believes in territorial integrity for all nations, mutual non-aggression, and equal commerce. And specifically in this speech, he gives a shout out to Namibia, the Saharan people, and most notably the Palestinians. So in Sankara's presidency, we will see how he applies these ideas into his presidency. So the thing about Thomas Sankara is that not only did he preach for the freedom of oppressed peoples. Not only did he preach for the destruction of the bourgeoisie and to get rid of poverty, not only preached those things, he actually practiced them, and he was incredibly successful in doing so. So for instance, he made a lot of cultural changes, changed it from Upper Volta, the name given by the French, to Burkina Faso, to reestablish national identity. He designed a new flag, I believe, and Thomas Sankara, fun fact, actually writes the new national anthem because he is a guitarist and a supporter of the arts. In a mere matter of weeks, he vaccinates 2.5 million children, and during his presidency, the literacy rate rose from 13% to 73%. He plants more than 10 million trees to prevent desertification, which is a very successful policy, by the way, and one of the first African leaders to appoint women to high government positions. In addition to this, he actually gets rid of forced marriages and female genital mutilation, which are part of Burkina Faso's cultural heritage. And though this does anger a lot of traditionalists, Thomas Sankara more so prioritizes the health and the happiness of his people. And I believe personally that is what matters the most. He does all of this in he does all of this within just 3 years of power. And he does all of this with, disapproval from the wealthy, disapproval from those who are complicit in the injustice that was happening before Burkina Faso's establishment. And basically, life's going pretty good in Burkina Faso. I don't know what I'm saying. Additionally, he sells the government fleet of Mercedes cars and replaces them with much cheaper and lower salaries of government positions. Again, this angers a lot of high-up people. Thomas Sankara also lowers, he never allows his salary to go past $462 a month. He also has very little possessions of his own. I believe he only had his guitar and his home. Basically, that was it. He gets rid of the feudal system and he redistributes the land to the people. Essentially, Thomas Sankara is successful in that Burkina Faso becomes self-sufficient, which, if you think about it, is something that Mao and Stalin failed to do. So, is the argument of self-sufficiency being impossible correct? But I feel like it's likely possible if Burkina Faso was able to accomplish it in such a short time. But the question of whether Thomas Sankara would be able to keep up, then that's the real question. In addition, what I find very admirable is that he refuses foreign aid, and he actually encourages other African nations to do so as well. That is probably the tipping point for a lot of foreign Western imperialist nations, and I believe that is definitely what contributed to his death. So, excuse me. The factors that lead to his death. So he's already a very anti-imperialist, and he makes this known. And he is very much an advocate for Pan-Africanism, which, if you're not familiar, is the idea of a united and therefore stronger Africa. So essentially what happens is that Sankara fires thousands of political officials for theft of public funds, and this highly angers the elite. France is aggravated as well. So what happens is that Thomas Sankara is assassinated by a friend that I mentioned before in his early days, Blaise Compaoré, who reverses all of Sankara's nationalization policies. And for a long 27 years, Burkina Faso was not the same nation that it stood for under Thomas Sankara. However, as you may know, or maybe you don't know, a new, younger leader, Ibrahim Traoré, he takes over a coup after Blaise Compaoré is dictator for a while, after 27 years, to follow Sankara's legacy. and he promotes essentially all of the similar ideologies that Sankara has promoted, and currently is working and has been highly successful in promoting a better Burkina Faso. So I chose to talk about this topic even though I did research on it a very long time ago, as you can tell with how my memory has rested, because I believe that now, with the rise and very concerning far-right movements across the world, and most notably in the US, I believe that it's very important to acknowledge past events in history, and most importantly, in my opinion, what has gone right in history, so that not only do we know what not to repeat, but we know and have hope that it is possible for reform, and it is possible to live in a world with peace.